Do you want to become more flexible? Oftentimes, when people think about trying to improve their flexibility, activities such as stretching come to mind. But what about lifting weights? Have you ever thought about doing strength training or lifting weights in order to improve your flexibility? While this idea may seem counterintuitive, there's actually a lot of evidence to suggest that it can be extremely beneficial for helping to improve your joint mobility and flexibility. On today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, Julie and I are going to discuss this idea of how resistance training or lifting weights can help improve your flexibility. We're going to cue the intro song and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know that we recently released a book called The Exercise for Life Method. And if you enjoy the conversations that we have every single week on this podcast, then you are going to love this book. So to pick up a free copy of this book, all you have to do is go to exerciseforlifemethod.com. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we are coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. But what also goes into the idea of building the health and function of your muscles? A lot of times when we think about building the health and function of our muscles, we may think about doing things like lifting weights. But is there more that can come from lifting weights than just building the health and function of your muscles, such as actually helping your joints improve their mobility and helping you improve your flexibility overall? That's exactly what we are going to be discussing today.
I am so excited about this topic because not only does weightlifting improve your flexibility, but the opposite is the rumor that goes around, meaning if you lift weights, and specifically if you lift weights heavy, which is how you get most of the health benefits from exercise, then you will limit your range of motion, you will likely become stiff, and you're going to be, not flexible. Charlie, I think that the start of this idea that lifting heavy is going to make you less flexible is when people look at the extreme versions of people that lift weights, meaning people that lift weights for an extreme hobby or professionally, meaning bodybuilders or heavy weightlifters. We often see that they are really muscular and they don't move the way that a lot of normal non-professional lifters want to move. And so I think then we start labeling, if I lift heavy, I will turn into, bulky weightlifter person and I won't move as fluidly or as comfortably as I would like.
Julie, it's so funny you bring that up because I remember back in college having a conversation with one of my friends and my friend asking legitimately, hey, if I lift weights and I build muscle, will I become less flexible? Like this notion is out there and it's very prevalent. And I remember at that time, I was super into the mainstream powerlifting blogs and the mainstream sports performance blogs, and the phrase that kept getting thrown out when people would say, well, if you lift weights, you're going to become less flexible, is the authors would say, well, you can't stretch bone, meaning like if you don't have any muscle, like, what are you going to stretch? What are you going to elongate? And the point of that is to say your muscles are what help you move your bones, right? And so if you build more muscle, if you improve the function of your muscle, you have a greater opportunity to move your bones and become more flexible. So I just thought that was kind of a funny story because this idea of if you build muscle, you are going to lose flexibility is super prevalent. But at the same time, look at, say, Olympic weightlifters, like the people that, we saw in Tokyo who were doing the clean and jerks and, having the bar go way up over their head with just a massive amount of weight on there. Their flexibility is ridiculous, like how much they are able to bring their arms back overhead and how low they're able to drop down during their squats. And the same thing with power lifters too, like the depth that they have to get for their squats and the range of motion that you see in their shoulders. But just the visual appearance of them makes us believe that, oh, well, if we were to get as bulky as them, which I mean, the vast majority of us will never be able to do, that somehow we wouldn't be able to move as well. And yet the evidence is contradictory to that in so many ways. I think out of all the professional athletes and all the professional bodybuilders I've worked with, I've maybe run across one person, maybe one, whose range of motion was somewhat limited due to actually the mass of their tissue. And guess what? That person is not you. So don't worry about it. That's not the thing that's going to cause you to lose range of motion if you build some muscle. In fact, like you're saying, Julie, it's going to be exactly the opposite, where when you do it the way we're going to teach you how to do it, your range of motion will more than likely improve.
I love that you left it on that note, Charlie, because I was just about to bring that up, where many of our listeners, I'm sure you're listening, thinking, well, when I weight train, I get these negative responses that then limits my range of motion, meaning when I lift, I get tightness. When I lift, I get this achy, that thing that comes up. When I lift, I actually feel more limited because I'm sore the following day. And those things, yes, actually do happen. The key to manipulating this is going to be manipulating how you lift your weights. So we're going to talk about this because everything that Charlie just said is so true. If you are strengthening your muscle tissue, they are the things that move you. Muscle is the thing that moves you. So the more that they are able to function properly, which their function is to contract. So the more that they're able to contract properly, the better your body should be able to move. The problem arises when you violate some of the markers or the indicators that your body will naturally tell you. But we have to talk about what those markers and indicators are and how to work with them, because surprise, social media is not talking about them and the news is not talking about them. I've never seen a workout demo on Good Morning America where they show you or talk about respecting how your body is functioning. They always are saying, oh, we'll do a modification. Okay, well, how do we customize a modification for your body? And why does it have to look completely different than the original exercise? So let's talk about some of these principles of what to apply to your weight training that will help you maintain and improve your flexibility. Because I've been doing this for 10 years, Charlie's been doing this for more than 10 years, and in our experience combined, we have never seen weight training limit someone's range of motion when they're weight training for the health and function of their body, which is everything that we do here.
Exactly. So I think the first thing that I'd like to bring up is this idea of using full range of motion and what full range of motion actually means in respect to what your body's able to do. And then using that concept, how you can use that concept to then actually improve your full range of motion. See, a lot of times when people say, oh, we're going to use full range of motion, the fullness of the motion is often measured by external things, meaning, well, when you do a bench press, full range of motion means getting the bar to your chest. When you do a squat, full range of motion means getting your butt to your heels. When you do, a pull down, full range of motion means reaching up so your biceps are by your ears and then pulling the bar so the bar is past your chin, right? So it's all this external stuff that we are saying, well, that's full range of motion. What we want to shift towards is, instead of thinking about externally what might be considered full range of motion, start thinking about internally what might be considered full range of motion, and specifically full range of motion for your body right now in this moment. And I specify that because your full range of motion can change, and it can change while you're doing your workout. It can change from one set to the next. And so picking up on where your full range of motion is and getting pretty competent and skilled at that will actually go a long way to helping you improve your full range of motion.
So what we really have to do is throw away what we think the general full range of motion is and what applies to everyone. So what you see in a yoga class or what you read in an anatomy book, when you raise your arm, it should be 180 degrees. When you lift your leg up, it should be 45 degrees to 90 degrees. We have to throw all that away because the only full range of motion that matters is the full range of motion that you have in the exact moment when you're doing that exercise in your workout. So let me give you an example. 2 weeks ago, I did the lat pull down machine. That's the one where you raise your arms up, you grab onto a bar or some handles, and then you pull down to your chest. If you could imagine, the range of motion that we have to check to customize the range of motion for your body is how high can I raise my arms? We call that shoulder flexion. So what you can do is just go ahead and sit on your lat pull down machine and check your range of motion. Raise your arm like you're in class and raise it up high and see how far it can go without changing your spine. Try to keep it very central to your shoulder and shoulder blade and see what you have going on in that shoulder. Maybe you're limited that day. Maybe one side's less or more. If you do have an asymmetry like that, meaning one side moves a lot more than the other, then you want to limit to the lesser side. And if they're both at whatever degrees, let's say you're at 120 degrees, great, that's your full range of motion for today for this set. Then you need to make sure that the machine is not going to pull you past that 120 degrees. So the way you can do that on the lat pull down machine is lean your torso back. That way you're not going past 120 degrees at your shoulder. So I said 2 weeks ago for a reason. So what's interesting is that now I don't have a shoulder issue going on, but actually I have an infant at home and he scratched my eyeball. And so right now I'm wearing an eye patch on my eye. And what's interesting is that my body is responding so crazy to having this one eye being patched up so that it can heal. When I went to go do the lat pull down, first I checked my range of motion, and sure enough, the side where my eye is patched, that shoulder is limited. My body is obviously protecting against whatever is going on in my eye. It's doing whatever it needs to do. Today, I have a much different range of motion in my shoulder, not because of a shoulder injury, but because of other stuff going on, than I had 2 weeks ago. And so what's important is that I customize to what my body is doing right now today. So if I had 180 degrees 2 weeks ago and I have 120 degrees today, then 180 degrees 2 weeks ago was a perfect range of motion for me to strengthen and work. And 120 degrees today is the perfect range of motion for me to strengthen and work. Problems arise when you go into a workout and say, well, last time I had 180 degrees, or the picture on the machine says I should have 180 degrees. I'm just going to do that. That is where your body is going to start intentionally limiting your range of motion, and it will show up as little twangs and pains, tightness, post-workout soreness, meaning that soreness that you get the following day. So when you violate where your body is telling you need to stop, that's when your body is going to have issues and going to start saying, well, you did more range of motion than we had, so I need to limit you more.
Oh, you are saying so many good things right now. Okay, so I have 3 points I want to bring up because what you were saying is just total gold. Okay, first and foremost, if you are listening to this podcast and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I like what you're saying, Julie, but I'm having a difficult time visualizing it. Actually, in our Trainer Tip Tuesday videos, we break this down for a lot of different exercises that we show, and we're going through right now, just wrapping up the pull down series that we created, and that was for August. So depending on when you're listening to this, you can go back and look at our Trainer Tip Tuesdays for August. But we've also done it for different exercises like the leg press, like the row, the chest press, the knee extension, the crunch machine. So all these different things that Julie talked about, it's applicable to any exercise that you do. So definitely go back and reference those videos if you want more of a visual of what Julie discussed. The second thing that you brought up, Julie, that I thought was a really key point is understanding that the pictures that are on the machines, those are just kind of general representations of the overall theme that is somewhat recommended during the exercise. And I know that's very vague language, but because the pictures are really vague, okay? I've had clients come in the past and they say, well, look at the picture here on this machine. When I do it, it doesn't look like that. And we have to have a conversation about that and say, okay, well, this is just kind of a general representation. What we now need to do is match your body, match the exercise, how you're doing it, to what your body offers. Okay, so that's what we call our body matching. The way I like to think about it is, if you've ever been driving down the road and you see one of those yellow signs that has like the squiggly on it that says, okay, the road is going to curve. You don't look at that sign and say, okay, well, it's going to curve 30 degrees this way and then 30 degrees back, and so that's exactly how I'm going to turn my car. No, you still have to watch the road ahead and make the adjustments in the turn accordingly. That sign is just giving you a heads up, hey, this is what's coming, all right? The picture on the machine is the same way. You don't look at it and be like, oh, well, the person is perfectly vertical here, so I need to be perfectly vertical and have my hands exactly here. No, it's just giving you a heads up that like, hey, this is the general representation. Now, the third thing that I want to bring up based on what you said, Julie, is talking about the negative repercussions of what could happen if you don't follow your body's full range of motion in this moment, okay? And you talked about, hey, some tightness could come up, some soreness, some achiness, and that's probably the more mild of symptoms. I want to tell you a story. When I first got into personal training, I had a client. Actually, he didn't become a client. He was a consultation that, at the gym I was working at, you would get a free session. And so we did the consult, and then we did the free session. And more or less, as some people do, they just want their free session to be what they want to do for that day. And like, oh, okay, cool. So what he wanted, and more or less for me to do that day, was follow him around the gym, watch him do the workout that he was already planning on doing, and not even give my 2 cents, but just like spot him during the workout. And so it's like, well, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I don't need your input. I just want you to spot me when I'm doing squats and stuff. And so one of the exercises was doing a squat, okay? And he had a barbell across his back, and he would do the squat, and he got really, really low on the squat. And the thing was, though, is he got low, but as he got really low, he really started to kind of tuck his pelvis and round his spine. And so I brought that up to him and said, hey, you're really tucking your pelvis here. You're rounding your spine. It might become more stressful on your back. And he said, well, I used to stop here with my squats, and then I realized that I wasn't doing real squats. So I decided to just, don't worry about the amount of weight, just, get rid of my ego and, start doing real squats. And I thought that's kind of ironic, because the fact that you think now you're doing real squats, that's still an ego stroke, but that's a whole different conversation. Anyways, point being is, because he wanted to try to match his body to what he believed the full motion, the real exercise, the external markers were that he needed to hit in order to do a squat. Well, on that day, he was fine. But a few weeks later, I started not seeing him. And then about a month after that, he came back in the gym and said, hey, where you been for the last month? He goes, well, I really tweaked my back during squats. And I thought to myself, yeah, man, I could have seen that 6 weeks ago. Like, that's what I was trying to tell you, is because you were trying to match your body to some external markers, you set yourself up for injury, and then you had to take a month off from exercise, as opposed to saying, well, regardless of what's happening around my body from a depth perspective or how low I'm getting my butt, I need to respect what my body can do right now and stay within that. So that's, I guess, a more extreme version of, hey, if you don't respect your range of motion, yeah, you might be achy and sore and tight in the moment and the days that follow. But if you keep not respecting your motion, eventually your body's just going to say, yeah, we don't like this. Guess what? You're not going to exercise for a bit because now you're injured.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because squats are a huge one where there's like this preconceived visual of what should be happening, right? Some people believe, get your femurs, parallel to the ground, meaning like get your butt to a chair, basically. And some people believe, well, you got to get your butt to your heels. And so what we really actually have to do is, where does your range of motion say that you're okay doing that while keeping all other parameters and quote unquote form in line? The other place where people really, really start to disrespect their range of motion is when they're moving so quickly in the gym that momentum takes over.
Yeah.
The classic one of this is the knee extension machine. Oh my gosh, because people just want to kick that bar that has all the weight on it up like a soccer ball.
Right.
They're just kicking that thing, and then people wonder why like their hip flexors and their quads are so tight feeling and their hamstrings are feeling off. Well, because you're kicking and using momentum and flinging the weights up. Where it's not really an issue is actually like mid-range, because your body is like cool with that range usually. Where it becomes an issue is that you're throwing the weight past where your body would naturally be able to take it if your body was having to tolerate the weight. Meaning, if you did a rep that took you 3 seconds to get to the top, just think 1, 2, 3. That's slow, but not like super slow. Your body will stop straightening your knee when it can't straighten your knee anymore. But when you go fast, oftentimes your body will keep straightening your knee because now you're not having to hold the weight. The weight is like moving with momentum, not because of your quad muscles. So keep that in mind too when you're exercising and trying to respect your range of motion for that day. Is when you move slowly, your body will also show you where you have to stop your range of motion relative to the weight while you're doing the exercise.
I like that you bring up that example because I see that a lot as well, where it seems like with that particular exercise, and I really think this does carry over to other exercises as well, but people think the goal is to get their knee straight while doing that exercise, as opposed to try to straighten their knee. And you think, well, that sounds exactly the same. No. The first way is you're thinking about the destination, meaning the goal is to have the knee perfectly straight, right? That's how most people do it. The other is more the process of getting there, right? To straighten the knee, get the knee perfectly straight, or to straighten it. One is outcome oriented, one is process oriented. And the thing about having it be process oriented is when you focus on just trying to straighten the knee, actually what you're focusing on is squeezing your quads, which means it becomes very muscle centric motion as opposed to joint centric motion. Those are two different things.
So I think we've kind of covered like 3 different range of motion ideas here. Number 1, you need to check your range of motion for each joint before you do the exercise. That might sound cumbersome if you've never done it before, but it literally will take you 5 seconds just to find out. So just do the motion that you're about to do with weights, but without weights, and find out what's happening in your body, because you might have had an issue with that joint since you've last done it, or you might have something else impacting your body, like my example, that is impacting that joint, but you wouldn't have thought it was impacting that joint. The other thing is you got to keep your range of motion where you can maintain form. So for example, the one Charlie gave with the squats is, hey, it's cool if you take your butt down to your heels when you squat, but not if you have to compromise your form to do so. So there was another one. And the third one is, hey, let's say you sit on the knee extension machine and you can fully straighten your knee, but then under the weight, you can't straighten your knee. Well, great. That's your new range of motion for the day. You have to do what you can do relative to the weight that you're also trying to lift once you're under that resistance.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, those are all different things I need to keep in mind while I'm exercising. And you talked about all different ways that I can limit my range of motion, that my range of motion can regress when I exercise. But how does following your advice actually improve my range of motion? Well, think about it like this. When you do an exercise or when you do anything that's particularly stressful to your body, does your body tend to tighten up or tend to relax? I mean, honestly, if you've ever sat in traffic, if you've ever, been on an angry phone call, if you have ever even just like watched a scary movie, like that when your body is more stressed or perceiving more stress, things tighten up. Your body tightens up. And the same goes for exercise. So when you exercise in a manner that's very stressful to your body, by violating your range of motion through moving more than what your body says you should, through compromising your form, and through moving too fast and using momentum to move too far, that's going to be excessively stressful to your body, and that is going to limit your range of motion. Your body's going to tighten up. Well, the flip side to that is when you are very respectful to your body, and when your body sees what you're doing as a stimulus as opposed to a stress, guess what? Oftentimes, your body will actually start to relax. Your body will allow you to move more because it feels safe, it feels protected. You are showing it that, yes, you are providing this challenge to your muscles and to your body, but you are still respecting what your body says is appropriate and is feasible for it right now. And when you do that, your body will allow you to have more range of motion. In other words, that's how lifting weights can actually make you more flexible.
Absolutely. I love that you said that, Charlie, because it's so true. So many people think that stress from the gym comes from lifting too much weights, or better said, lifting too heavy of weights. But actually, the biggest stress that we see, especially because we're monitoring people with MAT when we see clients come and go, one of the biggest reasons why muscles will start to shut down, meaning you're going to have some tightness and some achiness or limited motion, is going to be when you do the stress that's not from heavy weights, but more from violating your current range of motion. The more that you go past where your body says it's cool, the more restricted you become. The more that you respect where your body's limits are for each and every workout, the more that your body will open up. Because what we find is that when muscles are contracting appropriately, we're using the range of motion where they feel strong and stable, oftentimes your body will give you more range of motion, which results in us feeling more flexible and more mobile. So definitely keep that in mind, because I think that no one has ever brought that up to me until I got into the field, that range of motion is a huge stressor in the gym and probably more potent of a stressor than heavy weights.
For sure. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is hesitant to really go all in with their resistance training because they're concerned about losing mobility or losing flexibility? Share this episode with them so they can learn how lifting weights can actually make you more flexible despite what is commonly said in the mainstream media and mainstream fitness worlds. And while you're online, head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So how'd you like that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed today, then you are going to love the Exercise for Life Method, which is a book that we just put out and you can get a free copy of by going to exerciseforlifemethod.com. All we ask is that you pay for shipping and handling, so head there now and get your free copy, as well as some exclusive bonuses that you will get instant access to when you get the book. You can learn more and get your copy at exerciseforlifemethod.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Cates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.